These are folks who have passed on to the ancestral realm, folks who have inspired us to love reading, literature, writing, books, community. All of us have had someone who's taught us something that maybe is no longer physically with us. So we've read an author that has moved us to want to learn more, or we've met someone in passing that we may not even remember their name, but know that they're no longer with us. Or we may not even know someone physically, but we know we've heard of their passing, but they have inspired us to be here today. This is our time to name those people out loud or in the chat box if you'd like. You can type in that person's name that you'd like to be raised up in our circle tonight, our virtual circle tonight. And the reason why we do this is because we acknowledge from a humble place that we're not the first ones to have these kinds of gatherings or have these sort of intentions together. And so we do this in service of those who came before us. And we want to create space for that in book club. So feel free to type in the names in the chat box or say them out loud, and we'll hold a moment of silence for them.
Albert and Joella Johnson.
Alice Walker.
Ronald Jones.
James Baldwin.
Seal Clifton.
Maya Angelou. Sorry. Maya Angelou.
Neville Sutherland.
Maceo Cleaver. Peter Garcia. Breonna Taylor.
Pauli Murray.
Toyin Salah.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the names from the chat. We have Karen Johns, Toni Bambara, Lucio Clifton, Pedro Ramos, Josefina Herreras, Carolina Maria de Jesus, Geraldine Coleman, Manuel Ferreira, Liam Slally, Toni Morrison, Malcolm X, George Floyd, Nina Pop, Amadou Diallo. Cool. Thank you all for that. Now I guess you can go into the conversation. For today's conversation, I believe we had to read up to page 68. It's cool if you didn't read. It's cool if you didn't finish all the way up to page 68. The discussion really can go wherever which way, we'd like it to go. So we can discuss everything from the title to the cover to if you have, if you've read Gayl Jones before, if you want to share about the author, anything whatsoever, since it's the first day. And if you would like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself when you chime in, that would be really helpful, so we get to know who it is that we're chatting with tonight. So yeah, I'll leave it up to y'all. I know, Ron, this is your favorite book, so don't feel like if there's some parts, we have Ron, this is his favorite book, so don't feel bad,
No
don't feel like you
pressure.
have to love it. Just because Ron loved it, no pressure, just the founder loves the book, but whatever.
Pressure. I will kick you out this book club if you don't.
But yeah.
But I mean, I can start. The straightforward storytelling of the book, how it just sort of so succinctly chronicles the tragic history of Black people in this hemisphere. It's not a textbook by any means, but it is almost telling you the full history, not the full history, but the ramifications of slavery in this hemisphere and those ongoing issues and challenges that we are dealing with even now, And the quick pace at which it tells it seems to belie like what you think can be told in such a short book. This is it's not, I don't even think it's 200 pages. And it's really just like stripping away. And, with everything that we're going through right now, as far as folks finally realizing that policing comes out of slavery, and we're not so far removed from that system, the book is just, I love it even more. And also,
Hi, I'm sorry.
so I just want to let everyone know that you're muted. So when you want to speak, just unmute yourself and you can talk as long as you want. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, hi. Yeah, my name is Laura. Also Kagiso. I go by two names.
We're going to call you Cookie.
No Cookie, Kagiso. It means peace, brother. So this is my first time at this particular book club. I belong to another one in the company of my sisters, and we meet every month. So I'm glad to be here.
What city are you in?
I'm in the Bronx, New York.
Oh, cool. Welcome.
Yeah. Yay, Bronx. Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Absolutely.
So it's funny because when I saw the title of this book, I said, I know I have it somewhere, but I realized that I hadn't read it. So I have 1,000 books in my house. So I looked through everyone and I found it. So I was so glad that I found it and I started reading it. And so there's so many different issues. I mean, there's the rape of our women, capturing of our women and subjugating them to being whores. There is the control by men on women, I mean, it's just just so many different issues. There's the colorism part of it, and and this is just the first chapter. So I mean, it brings up a lot of issues that we're still dealing, like you said, we're still dealing with today. And so I hadn't read any of her other books, and this is the first time I'm reading Corregidora. And so it just is, it's very moving. It's very moving. And I just hope that she fights back, against a lot of this stuff, and it's a big burden on her, because her mother and grandmother said to have other generations, but she can't, you know. But I hope she finds some other ways, you know, because we can find other ways, just like like today with the COVID, we're finding other ways to, you know, be with each other, to do this, to do that. So I hope in the book she finds other ways to have other generations to follow. So anyway, that's my take.
Ron, you picked us a doozy to read. Like it, as everyone said, it's been so impactful in such a short period of time. And I have the audio book, but like I kept it doesn't even announce like when it's ended or when the first part is in. Or I'm hoping that's the first chapter. But like you could easily keep going and be like, oh Lord, no, I'm only supposed to stop at a certain point. But you know, but there's just too much going on right now. There's too much, and I had to go read this. I had to go read about this lady to see who is this person who's written this book and why is she so quiet? Like, why do we rarely hear anything about her?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I just did the lazy Wikipedia search, and I I found some interesting things that to me almost make sense. So okay, being a queer woman, I have always had this fear, even at a young age, when, like, you know, I was seeking women who were my age or what have you. So that's, you know, not I don't relate in the book in that way, but I always had a frustration of people thinking that I would turn them out. You know what I'm saying? Like that always frustrated me. You know, as if, you know, who wants to be with somebody that you have to coerce them to be with, right? So
right.
That always frustrated me. And so when I learned of Miss Jones' history and learned that her husband had attacked some woman at gay pride and basically, well, he attacked her at gay pride. When the lady hit him or something to that effect, he left and went and got a weapon and came back looking for her. And so they ended up fleeing the country and they went somewhere in Europe. And so she disappeared for a while, and then I see that she's back in the States, and I don't know how long she's been back or whatever.
For a while.
And I almost wonder, like, was that how she felt about women? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I know that there are exceptions and that there might be some women who may not feel the way that their spouse does, but for this man to, you know, attack somebody at a gay pride parade, first off, why are you there? Secondly, you're chastising this person, saying that they're going to go to hell. You know, like, why are you there? But I wonder if she felt that same way because there's so much vitriol in that. You know what I'm saying? In the story about women's relationships with sexually with other women and of course the child situation, you know, and that's, oh God. So I have to ask, okay, so there's a part in the book where Jeffy says shit twice. And I have been asking my friend and my honey, is this implying that something is going on? Because why is this little girl saying shit to this grown woman this early in the morning? And I'm like, please tell me this is not happening, you know? And so can someone, like, take me out of my misery? Is that what's going on at that time?
Can I just shed a little light? I'm going to say it very briefly. I think both Gayl Jones and her husband had mental health issues.
Wow.
If you read, like I read a few articles on her, and both her and her husband had mental health issues. Her husband committed suicide in some police raid, and the police were, you know, entering his apartment and something happened, but I'm pretty sure just from reading about them, they both had mental health, or she still has, maybe, I don't know her. She hasn't been public in like 25 years. And the husband's been dead probably equally as long. So, and again, that doesn't explain it, but I just wanted to add that 2 cents.
This is Anais, and I'll just say I've been coming to the book club for, I think, about a year and a half now. It's my highlight of the week. It's a place where we've built community, where we go deep, where people get loud. It's just a really precious space for me. So I just wanted to say that. And I was thinking, wow, we got so quickly into this piece about sexuality, because I had the whole section marked that I wanted to talk about in relationship to that. I'm also a queer woman, and and I thought, this is really interesting because she's laying out all of her conflicts and contradictions about her own sexuality. I mean, most writers are talking about themselves in one way or the other. But it is interesting how there's some clear, like, you know, homophobic stuff, you know, like, and kind of like, I also didn't know what that scene was, you know, that she's overhearing, and the conversation between the young woman and Kat. And I kind of figured, well, from her reaction, something must have led her to believe that there was something going on between this older woman who's 60 years old and this young kid who's probably 14. But that's kind of the implication. But I thought, well, I wasn't really sure either what it was that she overheard when that, you know, when the young woman was saying shit and then shit. But from the way the story goes on, it seems like that's what's implied. But I also thought that there were, in this first section, there are at least 2 times when she raises her, one time when she raises her own question about her sexuality. You know, like, now that she can't give birth, you know, will men want her? And will that be, you know, the choice that she will make? But then the other section, and we could go back to it later. I also want to hear what other people have to say, but there's a long section on page 60 where actually Kat starts to talk about, comes back to her and tries to have a conversation with her about her sexuality. And this is a section where I feel like only a woman who's had those very experiences about conflicts about her sexuality or has made that choice would be able to write these couple of pages. I'd like to hear from other people and go back. I'd love to read this section. You know, I wasn't planning to do it so quickly in the conversation, but I definitely would like to hear from other people. And then at some point I would like to read this section on page 60 and 61.
This is Laura again. I felt that not being able to have a child, she didn't feel like a woman, but that she didn't feel, I don't think it made her feel like, you know, she was gay. And I think she was homophobic, you know, but she just didn't feel, I don't know, fulfilled as, like she would be fulfilled as a woman, or anybody would like her because, any man would like her because she couldn't, you know, bear children. So that's what I felt. But I haven't read, I just read those 60 pages, so I don't know what's going on later. Yeah.
It's Linda from the Bronx as well. Ursa's hardness toward Kat really surprised me, because up until then, to me, she presented herself as such a rebel and as someone who probably struck me as someone who didn't care what other people thought. So for her to come down on Kat so hard for this perceived thing really took me aback. It surprised me. It stopped me.
Mm. Yeah.
She Corregidora, excuse me, Ursa, does seem to have like a masculine way of thinking about life and about women, that they're clear gender roles, or more than just gender roles, but there are clear roles that, you know, men have and women have, and the two aren't sort of mixing.
So what time period is it? That's what I was wondering. I don't know if I missed that. I mean, was this around the same time that
1947. It starts in
Oh, okay.
1947 is the first opening of the book.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hi, I'm Karen, and I lived my many years in the Bronx, but I'm in Manhattan. And I think that for me, I was a bit taken as, and I don't remember her name, Anais, I'm not saying it right now, I apologize. Anais was saying about her perhaps being very hard on Kat. I was taken aback by that also. I think actually Linda said that. And I guess I didn't even think that she might have been gay or queer until she came down hard on Kat, and it was almost as if she resented the young girl even thinking that it was okay to, you know, fondle her in bed. So then I began to think, oh, maybe, you know, I would have thought, if, you know, prior to that, that she was definitely a heterosexual, and she was offended that, you know, this young girl was doing this to her. But then once it became clear with that conversation with Kat and what she overheard with the young girl, then I began to think, oh, maybe there was a relationship that was a more intimate level between the older woman and the younger woman that I didn't see coming. I would have never have thought that they even had a relationship.
I was also struck by the young woman talking to an older person that way. If this is 1947, I mean, you know, usually that didn't happen. I mean, there had to be some kind of respect, you know. So I don't know, you know, it does, you know, or something where they would, you know, give their opinion, but it would be in a very respectful kind of way, not to curse in front of them or whatever, you know. So that's just an aside, you know. And
unless there's a level of familiarity between the two,
Right.
that
Right.
would allow, you know, that more sort of confrontational talk between people who are 2 generations apart, or
Yeah.
8 generation apart.
Right, possibly, yeah.
Yeah, because it seemed like they put, well, you know, they put her in a child's place when there are other adults around, but you could tell that she's been in a lot of adult-like situations. And I mean, you know, it's kind of unfair to her because, you know, you put her in these situations where you treat her like an adult and that she does adult things, and then, you know, when it's not convenient, hush. You know, I was just thinking about like when she was getting her hair pressed, you know, and we know that that's painful. Like, you know, if that didn't make you cuss, I don't know what would, because, you know, you're burning your skin. And for her to tell her to hush and to be quiet, or you should have been still, you know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't even have the autonomy to yell out and say, hey, you're hurting me, you know? But then, you know, y'all are clearly talking grown woman business, you know? And plus, I think, too, Ursa was her competition. So, no, I'm not going to respect you if you know, if you might be cutting in on whatever's happening, you might be have had eyes on her, and she might have felt that, and you know, I'm not, you know, she might not want to respect that.
I know that one of the things about, as people are saying that, you know, seemed to be shocking, like I don't think I was prepared for that either, that the possible relationship between Kat and the young girl. And it reminded me of Toni Morrison when we read Sula, you know, how Toni Morrison's characters are really complex. and they're not, and some of them are ugly, and some of them do things that aren't so nice. And it's kind of like she's throwing stuff in our face. And again, I don't know Gayl, I don't know of her work, Gayl Jones, and I don't know how the book goes on, and I don't know what comes of this. But I know that having read Sula, I was a little more kind of prepared for the characters not necessarily being so acceptable, that it was, a way to show how, life is complex and people are complex, and let's not judge them.
Yeah. And this book was edited by Toni Morrison before Toni Morrison wrote The Bluest Eye. She was an editor for Random House, and Toni Morrison found this writer and edited her first book, which is Corregidora. So that's like the similarities you were just speaking to, Anais. Which is kind of amazing if you think about it.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison, like one of the great writers of our time, before she was writing, she was selecting great books, which is, as far as being an editor, which is interesting.
Hey, Ron, I'd love to pick up on a theme you introduced earlier.
Yeah.
Hi, folks. I'm Christian, coming from Boston. Used to be in New York.
Sounds like you're going in and out, Christian. You there?
Looks like he's frozen.
It looks like you're frozen. Your pictures.
The face that cut out, Ron?
Yeah, cut
we
out.
can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. I think one of the things that struck me is I work for a place called the Racial Equity Institute, and we talk a lot about white supremacy and actually epigenetics, that concept that trauma can actually literally be passed down in our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't known much about epigenetics the last time I read this book, and now I almost feel like this is like the living incarnation of that concept, with this sort of blurring of inner and outer and history and all sort of one big sort of stream of consciousness. It took me a long time to figure out why I like this, and I think that's, I don't know why you like it so much, Ron, but that's kind of like why I like it.
That's the same reason I like it. I mean, when, the constant refrain of this book is this Portuguese slave owner, Corregidora, who rapes a slave or a prostitute that he owns, and then he rapes the child of that prostitute that
His daughter.
Owned. His daughter, exactly. And that is Corregidora mother, I believe. So, but Corregidora, Ursa's mother. Yeah. Ursa, right, and she's not letting us forget this. She's repeating this to us throughout at least the first chapter. So it really becomes clear to us, even in Ursa's dialogue is somewhat spare, but in these narratives, you can tell that there's a lot going on that has shaped the person she is, without her having to go deep into a backstory as far as dialogue with any other character. Most of our understanding of Ursa is her inner narrative, as far as the story is concerned.
Yeah, that Marta had said a comment earlier. I meant to gesture at it. So Marta, thank you for commenting. She shared, I love that it reads like a dialogue. There's so much that is said in between the lines. So just
exactly.
to echo whatever what Ron was just saying.
Exactly. And go back to Christian's point and his job. For years they said that the reason why Black people had suffered like high blood pressure and hypertension is because we had poor diets. when it turns out it's all of this trauma that we have to deal with,
Right,
all of
right.
these microaggressions that are probably having more of an effect on the health of all Black people. You know, you can see what's going on now, and what's going on now are conversations that Black people have in intimate spaces, but now we're seeing it presented on television every night with protests. But you know, we talk about people being killed, and we're talking about like that concern when the police come into our area and vicinity. You know, it is not always like a welcome presence. So we've been having these conversations for quite a while, and they've probably been affecting our health more so than our, more so than our diets, because I doubt that Black people eat any worse than white people. At least that's what when I look at the when I look at the line in the supermarket, everybody got junk in their cart. So
Right.
Yep. Dr. DeGrew said post-traumatic slave syndrome.
yeah, yeah. So
Right,
thank you.
and excuse me. And the psychologist Carl Jung talked about the collective unconscious, and I think we have carried it from the trauma of being kidnapped from the different African countries and brought here and brutalized all the way up to now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that contributes to our health and our illness and our anger and all the other things, you know. But since we are resilient people, it also contributes to our fighting back, you know. So there's a negative and then there is a positive too, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also want to name that what's interesting too is that not only is the epigenetics piece a real thing in terms of just intergenerational trauma and how that literally changes DNA and how it gets passed on. Also understanding that there is also, I would say, I guess, an epigenetics of culture in many ways coming out of the United States to to the rest of the diaspora. And so I think it's also interesting to think about how these narratives and these stories of intergenerational trauma, specifically in the Black community in the United States, how that's told so often kind of in a vacuum almost, without really understanding the context of the rest of the diaspora outside of the US. And then to name too that, like, what Ron was talking about, like the different like health disparities that are like placed upon our communities. Public health as like a system is an extension of the military. So even though like police brutality right now is being framed as like a racial justice issue, it really is also a public health issue in many ways, because it is an extension of the military. The first time that I guess public health was made as like an actual United States department was as a exercise in martial law. So to understand the connection of like the body and like what is seen as healthy or not healthy in our communities, and how we're often pathologized to be sick in many ways in a system that isn't really concerned about our health or wellness to begin with. So, you know, I just wanted to share that and to like contextualize that a little bit for the conversation. Just to see that, to the point that like they even pharmaceutical companies even came up with a pill for heart conditions specifically for Black folks called Bidil. And it was marketed and advertised specifically for Black folks. So this is how far, I guess I want to like give it a concrete example as to how far the medical industrial complex and public health systems have been able to pathologize our communities for profit in many ways. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of connect those dots for folks.
Yeah.
Ron just shared a link in the chat if y'all want to check it out. And also, you can save your chat. Like if you want, you can go to the chat, and where those three dots, you can click save chat to save it for yourself if you want to refer to the articles that people share later. And if other folks want to share other articles or other references with the rest of the group, feel free to do that too.
There was a quote I really liked on page 22, just kind of talking about things that get passed on through generations. And this quote was, I believe Ursa was recalling something Graham had said to her, and it's, the important thing is making generations. They can burn the papers, but they can't burn conscious, Ursa. And that's what makes the evidence. And that's what makes the verdict. And I just love that particular phrase, they can't burn conscious, because it made me think of also kind of just different systems of knowledge being passed on through generations, and just different ways that knowledge is transmitted, and what is perceived as sort of knowledge as well.
Yeah, this book is definitely strong on the oral tradition.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, I also kind of want to piggyback off of that, because there was also another section earlier on in the book, like around page 11.
Mm-hmm.
She sort of recalling her.
Camille Wanless.
Hi.
Where are you at? You in Jamaica, or are you in Harlem?
I'm in Harlem right now. Hi everyone, I'm Camille. I'm a writer.
Own it, girl. Own it.
Really happy to be talking about Corregidora. This is actually a book I read in undergrad. Haven't read it since, so I'm really happy to revisit the work. So there was just to go off of what Alyssa was mentioning, sort of just piggybacking off of that, because there was a part in here that also struck me, and sort of going back to what Ron was talking about, the oral tradition. And so it's her great grandmother telling her sort of that they have to bear witness, right? That they have to, we're leaving, your existence is evidence. Your mother's existence is evidence. You have to have children because you all are the evidence of these atrocities, of what the Corregidora had done to us. And the fact that having a child is not possible for her, and she will not be able to pass down this oral tradition in that way, really struck me. And I'm hoping, because I haven't read this in a very long time, so I'm not even sure what comes after this, but I'm hoping she finds a way to bear witness in another way.
It was also interesting how quickly they set up the book, that pivotal incident where her husband pushes her down a flight of steps, or pushes her down, almost happens in the very beginning of the book. Like usually they kind of ease into something like that, and this is like boom. And it feels like it reflects the bluntness of Ursa's life, and how even the bluntness with which Ursa speaks to people, like that's the first thing that happens. And Ursa's like really a blunt talker. I don't know. I've always been struck by how quickly this book jumps into the main part of it.
The first page.
Yeah.
It's on the first page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually they give you a little pretty backstory. It's like, boom, this is what we're talking about. Page 1,
Yeah.
page 2. You know,
Very
so,
Toni Morrison gesture to do that too.
yeah.
Like to just be like,
Yeah.
here you go,
Yeah.
toma. Like, yeah.
Or in
I,
Paradise, when she begins with "They kill the white woman first."
Yeah.
I was gonna say that too. Very Morrison. Like it made me think of The Bluest Eye too. How it begins with the like overarching.
they have a formula for it now. I went to a writer's workshop, I think like 2 years ago, and so the workshop was on writing an impactful short story. And so with the short story, you always start in the middle because you have so many questions. You know, where did they come from? And it guarantees for like a quick, like you said, a punch for quick punch for your money. So I think they bottled it up now, but probably back in the day, back then when this book came out, people were like, whoa, probably just hit them right in the jugular.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way it's written lends itself to this though, because there's so much dialogue. It makes it doesn't soften it, but it allows for that because of what, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Latasha just said, of like starting in the action, because there's conversation that allows you to learn how people are really quickly, because the way you talk is usually a reflection of who you are. I really appreciate that.
I felt that it was very much in your face. Starting off with that beginning, I kind of felt like, I'm not ready. I don't know you that well. But already you're kind of captured with Ursa and what happened to her. And, it was like, it was just there. I wasn't ready. And, the author, Gayl, wasn't caring that I wasn't ready. I agree with, I think it was Cleaver, am I saying your name right? That said, you don't have a nice soft kind of backstory or whatever. It was like, boom, page 1 or 1.5, whatever.
Yeah. Which I guess if you got a story to tell, no reason to kind of soften it up. Just jump right in.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it feels like a statement, because if that's not the worst thing that's going to happen in the book, what else is going to happen in these people's lives?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Even the way like she marries Tadpole is just like boom, not much courtship. Yeah, it actually comes out of the incident that her fight with her husband that forced her to lose her baby, or excuse me, forced her. Yeah, she was pregnant, forced her to lose the baby. So yeah, it's like, you want to get married? Yeah, why not? Let's get married.
Yeah, even how they were like, the doctors in the hospital said my womb would have to come out. I had to reread like 3 times. Like, what happened? Like, how did we get there? Like, yeah,
I know.
it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, Ron, that kind of struck me as almost like maybe that trauma narrative where there is not going to be any peaks. There's sort of a frozenness. I'm thinking like, The Stranger opens up and said, my mother died yesterday kind of thing, where just everything's on that sort of even keel.
True. It's almost everything is blunt in Ursa's life. There are no like soft edges. I guess like the soft edges comes when she's singing, that's her sort of relief. But everything else seems like a hard hit.
Sorry, this is Jillian. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm from Cleveland.
Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. And when I first read this, I read it actually on an airplane some years back, and the opening and then the rest of the novel really freaked me out. Like, I was like so freaked out by it that I had to like, hand the book to my boyfriend at the time and say, please read this, because I think this book is about the traumatized Black womb, the female organs and the female, you know. And I think the book is really like a biological study of what you're calling epigenetics, right? But centered, like just because it started the first page like that, I'm like, oh my God, this is all about our stuff, our actual female reproductive stuff, you know. And I wanted to join the discussion tonight because I've never heard anybody talk about it, and I wanted to hear what people thought about that. And since you're saying the strong start like that, I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarada. Sorry I'm late. Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add to that, just in terms of like the pain. I remember I read this a few years ago and then returned to reading it and feeling sick, feeling in pain, you know, when Ursa kind of experienced being thrown by her husband and being in the hospital and having to deal with being infertile. And I remember, you know, just feeling all of that pain, like, you know, just kind of taking that on. And it was really, really hard for me to read. Even now when I return to the book, I just, you know, heard about the young Black Lives Matter activist Toyin, who passed away. Actually, I shouldn't even say passed away. That's putting it very lightly. She was murdered and experienced gender violence. And also, you know, all of those feelings kind of came surging back in this reading. In this reading for me, you know, just kind of returning back to this story. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree in terms of the impact that this, you know, this book had, you know, given the circumstances that we're living in right now, given what we're hearing that is being inflicted on Black women, Black trans women. So yeah, it was just a difficult, you know, the few chapters or a few pages to read this time around.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sarada. It is, you know, to honor that. And there's some pages that are hard for you to read. Just, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know how we do in the book club. It's not about going page by page, but it's about the sort of like the overarching themes of a book. So if you ever hit a page that triggers something, and you want to stick with the book, by all means, you know, don't torture yourself through any part of a book.
What is the significance of Kat telling the story about the bloody chicken and Ursa talking about how she could not kill the fish? What did y'all get from that?
Did it have to be something deeper than that?
Look, the way this book is going, possibly. I don't know, but I mean, but it took up a lot of space.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, for that explanation. So I was just like, you know, I feel like I had my own hypothesis on it, but at the same time, it's like maybe it is just to keep the story going. I don't know.
What was your hypothesis, Natasha?
Let me see. How did I think about it? Well, I thought maybe Kat and her approach to life, like taking taking things into her own hands, seeing these men eat this chicken being bloodied, and everybody's like, it's good. And she's like, have y'all lost your minds? And even with her going into saying, and I never let, Joe cook for me, chicken or whatever again, basically, she probably had to take matters into her own hands for maybe her own safety, whereas maybe Ursa, right now where we are, she's constantly giving her power away. She's constantly, she's giving it to the doctor. She didn't want to sit on the table and take her clothes off, but she did anyway. Mr. Man, she didn't let them stop her from singing. But even with Tadpole and that whole thing, her wanting to be taken care of, but also the consequences of wanting to be taken care of and what that looked like. And even with her not being able to kill the fish in order to cook it, and her cousin coming all the way down the street and basically killing the fish, cooking the fish, and then taking half and giving her the rest of it. Like, it just seemed like a metaphor for giving her power away.
Oh, it's interesting because I guess I interpreted part of that a different way. The part where her cousin took the fish and only brought half back, I kept thinking about kind of communities of care and just the networks and the systems that have, sort of developed to kind of care for each other and make sure everyone's covered. Just how she says, that was all right though. I know she wanted to feed them children with it. So I was kind of thinking of that in that section.
I don't know, the exchange about the fish and the chicken, for me, sort of made it all the more like of a gut punch when she comes at Kat, because to me they were having this great bonding moment, and then here she turns all of a sudden. But wait a minute, y'all were just talking about Black women and food. I mean, the conversations that they have surrounding that are usually so nourishing and so connective, and then to come almost on the heels of that and turn against her. So to me, that was the setup.
Well, I also realized that chickens lay eggs, and that whole egg being a fertility symbol, which unfortunately Ursa is not going to be able to experience. So I thought that it was kind of talking about, I wrung the chicken, so I kind of saw it as chicken and eggs.
I was wondering about her feeling about men in this chapter. I mean, they're either antagonists or they're stupid, I mean, not cooking the chicken until the blood, until it's done. And then her husband is an antagonist. His cousin who comes in, even Tadpole, even though he took care of her, he wants to control her too, So I was just wondering about that, whether she sees the men as not accepting her as a woman, strong woman, and, just wanting to control her.
I was thinking that was very Toni Morrison again, like in so many of her books, how men are depicted, as just as you described it, Laura, either antagonistic or not really giving much. And it made me, what you were saying, made me think about what you were saying, Batasha, about the conversation about the chicken. And you're saying like, saying something about Kat and having her power, like she just took charge and she just, cooked the chicken and made it the way it needed to be. And I think that tension is there. That's between, other people have said it, but I want to just go back to it. The tension between Kat and Ursa around Ursa just, looking for Tad to take care of her. And there's like a tension there. And every time it comes up, You know, like Kat is kind of telling Ursa, like, you don't need to do that. This man was in love with you forever, and you didn't even see him. Like, if you didn't see him before, like, why do you think you see him now? You know, if you're going to marry this guy, it's not because you're in love with him. You know, it's because you're, you know, feel like you have to be dependent on him. And I think that's, you know, that theme is there. Like we said in the first chapter, everything, all the themes are in the first chapter. All the things we're going to grapple with are all in the first chapter. Go ahead. You're going to say something, Ron?
But she is married, you know, prior to Tadpole. So there is that kind of thought process that you don't, you know, if she's in a quote unquote relationship, she might not have even looked at Tadpole that way until she was out of the relationship. Now, that said, in her dialogue, it's clear that it doesn't feel like she has a passionate love for Tadpole. It almost feels like he was the first person on the scene and gave her a place to stay when she needed it. So therefore, her gratitude is to marry him. You know, it feels that way. But just in general, the way Ursa kind of navigates relationships, they all feel kind of brittle and fragile, you know? Like there doesn't seem to be, and again, we're still early in the book, but there doesn't seem to be any love for anyone, at least the way it's written anyway.
I think it's more so for her survival, I guess, you know, and it's something that we see, I guess, you know, something that we hear a lot of women, especially back in those days, you know, they need that security and that safety net. And so, you know, to get married and to be able, you know, so it could be that.
I mean, it was much more common, I don't know, I'm assuming, to just get married as opposed to wait until you found somebody, like how we do now. You know, you just wait until you find that right person. But back then, if you were 25 and you weren't married, you know, folks wondered what was wrong. For all you young women over 25 and not married now. As my mother reminds me.
I just wanted to add two things I sort of realized just now. One thing was that there was this part where Kat took the chicken to cook, and she at first thought everyone was going to kind of laugh at her comment, sort of like a joke, but everyone just kind of stood quiet and I guess appreciated the fact that she went to cook the chicken. So maybe that was a moment for Kat to realize that if she takes charge of something around men, maybe it's not that scary to do. And maybe that part was for her to realize that, you know, she can do things differently when around men, take charge. And I also realized that Kat had her own place, whereas Ursa didn't. So with that being said, it's like they're two different people. And from what it sounds like is that Ursa didn't even give herself time to, I guess, heal mentally from her marriage with the other gentleman who pushed her down the stairs. She just went straight to Tadpole after. So I guess it's just like it's two different worlds, two different people. And I guess maybe Kat is showing her that, hey, you can go a different route rather than just going from one man to another. I don't know. I think that's something that I kind of picked up.
No, definitely.
I got that as well.
And I think also that a conversation that they have about Kat's sexuality, I think, which really had a big impact on me, because Kat's saying, you know, I don't, how is it that she says it, about being made to feel the fool, you know, that she spends her days working for white people and she's always being made to feel the fool, you know, which to me is she's always humiliated. She's always in these situations where, you know, she's being humiliated. And then she says, you know, and I had that experience with men too. I had that experience with my husband, you know, that the way he treated me and the way we made love or had sex, or, you know, I would always feel like a fool. I would always feel humiliated. And, you know, I had to find a place in my life where I wasn't feeling humiliated. And that's what she's saying. I decided to be with women. I don't know about that young girl. I mean, that's still a question in all of our minds. But, you know, I had to find a place where I was not going to be humiliated. And guess what? What she's saying is was with women, you know, that in that kind of relationship, you know, she could stand in her power. She could choose not to have to be humiliated even there too. So I just thought that was so powerful, that she, given how homophobic it seems that Gayl Jones, you know, was or may have been or may be, that she would, like, you know to say that, know to articulate that experience for women of that level of humiliation that we can experience, you know, in our lives, and for women in relationships with men, and the choices that, you know, many women make, you know, to move out of being in relationships with men into relationships with women.
I have a question, Anais. Do you think that maybe Kat was trying to, I want to say convince, I guess, let her consider maybe being with another woman? And also, do you think that maybe there's some parts of Kat's that probably liked Ursa? Because I saw, like, I think Kat cried maybe once or twice when she was having a conversation with Ursa, you know, when her feelings got hurt. So I thought this thing.
Although Ursa does mock her tears as being somewhat fake, I believe. At least that's how Ursa sees them anyway.
What did you say, Ron? That
Ursa, when Kat is crying,
oh, her tears.
Yes, I'm sorry. Ursa kind of mocks them as not being real.
Yeah, that to me is Ursa just being hard and not letting herself, the character of Ursa, as opposed to the writer, Gayl Jones, you know, who writes this poignant scene. You know, I think the character Ursa just is so determined to not, you know, let herself be impacted by this story. Yeah. You know, and the tears that are obviously real tears, but she just can't let herself be impacted.
Yeah, I think because when they keep mentioning over and over again in the story how when women get evil, and I always wondered, like, what do they consider to be evil? You know what I'm saying? To have rage and to have emotion would be considered to be evil. But even with that thing with Kat, I almost think it was fear that probably made her cry, because she even asked her. She said, and I please forgive me if I went too far, because like I said, I was listening to the audiobook, and I didn't know if it was part 1 or part 2, but she almost had like this fear of, I feel like it was fear that she was saying, you're not going to tell the men, you know how they are, you know. Maybe that probably made her feel foolish again, you know what I'm saying? But maybe she put herself out there to be foolish in front of Ursa, and Ursa was like, you know, I can take it or leave it, you know. but I also think about Kat and how, once again, Ursa gives her control to people, because you know when she had left tadpoles and went over to Kat, Kat, you know, little things that Ursa wanted to do, you know, make her own bed, get out of her room, get out of the bed, you know, Kat was just like, no, you know, and a lot of hushing, you know, told her to hush like quite a bit, and I'm just like, what is this? You know, what is it with this hushing? You know what I'm saying? And yet she was saying the same thing to Jeffy as well, you know, quite a few times, telling Jeffy to hush, you know, that control. And, you know, it can be a powerful thing, especially when, you know, you're in a place where, you know, you have all of these amenities and all this power, you know, you're taking care of somebody else's child, whether the person is working or not. That's what she said when Lorena, I think, Lorna, I can't remember what her name is, Jeffy's mom, you know, she's always working, she's seeing all kind of men, and that probably left Jeffy open to being prey to Kat, you know what I'm saying, in any capacity, even if it wasn't sexual, it's still, you know, there's a lot that goes on with that. And I think Kat tried to flex that power muscle on Ursa, and in the beginning it worked until, you know, Kat did, I guess, the ultimate no-no for Ursa. But it reminds me that sometimes those that are oppressed can also be the oppressors. Kat had all this power, you know, and she was you know, she was a top-notch person in the community. But I also think about how Tadpole talked about her relationship with her husband, and how, you know, he was sitting up there with a Kotex box in the window, and I'm thinking like, well, Kat probably he needed something to cover his window, and that's the first thing she thought of. Like, y'all are focusing on silly stuff. He's trying to keep the rain down. He just as crazy as she is. I'm like, you know, but I mean, that was a different time, and even now, you probably couldn't send a guy off to get Kotex. I mean, some have evolved, you know, but yeah, I was just like, what, you know, maybe that's just me and my progressive ways. So I was just like, what does it matter? You need to cover your window. But anyway.
Yeah.
I just think that it's really interesting that in this first chapter that if I understand it, like the two main characters so far are women characters are Kat and Ursa, and that there should be that tension, that whole question of sexuality, of attraction, maybe not, yes, no. I think that's really, really interesting that she chose to write that into the story, into those two main women characters, you know, to start the book off, or to give us that, you know, to grapple with.
It's to make a segue. It's kind of like how Insecure ends with the two main.
Hey, no spoilers, no spoilers.
All right. I will not.
I haven't seen it.
Whoa.
Pure Insecure.
I will not spoil it. Forget it. Again, I said it. Again, I said it.
I was going to say to that point, the book was published in 1975.
Yeah. And it's set in the 40s.
So technically, homosexuality is still in the DSM-4 as a mental illness and disorder.
Right.
During
And
this time.
to keep that in mind, you know, as you read the book, not that it's an excuse, but Gayl Jones' mindset is probably a lot different than our mindset. Not making excuses for her, because there were many people back then, you know, writing broadly about homosexuality, but you know, she may have been a great writer, but a narrow thinker.
Can I share something? I was just thinking about the first page. I didn't get to page 60 that far, but I kept coming back to the sentence where she says, he didn't like for me to sing after we were married, because he said that's why he married me, so he could support me. I said I didn't just sing to be supported. I said I sang because it was something I had to do. And thinking about like singing is literally sharing your voice, and that this man is from the beginning is telling her that she can't have that, and that he's supposed to be responsible for her life or control her life, is a really powerful way to begin that story. And that for her saying like, it's not even about material things. I have to share my voice.
Yeah.
I was thinking. Oh.
You go ahead, Patasha.
Okay, I just wanted to run that quick. Like when I was thinking about what you just said, Cleaver. Think about like when strippers, start dating, and I'm thinking about Players Club, but no, in real life too, I'm sure. But when the guy, when the guys meet them at the strip club, or in his case, he probably met her while she was singing, and then all of a sudden, you're supposed to take yourself off of the market when you're singing or stripping or whatever the case may be. But I waited for her to say, well, that's how you met me, So I don't know, but that was the easy way to get to that.
Agreed.
Sure. So we have 1 minute left in the conversation. Any last comments, questions, or anything else anybody else wants to share?
I had a question.
Yes.
What does corregidora mean? Or what does that translate into?
Yeah. Good.
I've always just accepted it as a name, like a family name. Like, what does Kavanaugh mean?
Okay.
But it may have a deeper meaning. If you look at it, I've looked it up, and it's there in Brazil and in Portuguese. It's not an uncommon name. So, but I didn't do like scholarship around it to break it down that way.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, I'm like Googling now, what does it mean? That's a good question.
Yeah.
But in the context of the book, it was the name of the slave owner who raped everybody.
We see Journey. We just want to give a shout out to Journey and Jessica.
I was gonna say, can we shout out Journey real quick?
That's our young baby. That's our young book club baby.
My book it's not coming until Thursday, so. And I have the Audible. I didn't even think to check it. Someone said they have the audiobook. I just bought it, so I'll listen tonight.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I guess the book isn't as popular with other people as it is with me. But this book was really difficult for people to find. So
it was when I bought it on Amazon. It said it was the last copy left.
Wow. So I appreciate everyone, and it seemed like the publisher. I'd sent the link. It seemed like the publisher has copies, and I did send a link to the publisher. But again, I appreciate the effort everyone made in getting the book. So thank you so much.
Great. Hey, Journey. Hey, Jess. So beautiful.
Thank you.
Cool. How many weeks is the baby? Like a month now?
She's gonna be 6 weeks on Friday.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Oh, she's so cute.
She look a lot different. Like she looked like a baby now, not just like
a newborn.
Yeah. She looked like she ready to go soon. Like she be running soon.
So cute. Thank you for bringing Journey.
I read to her all the time. She read the whole All About Love book with me.